So now when we look at self-love, what is self-love? Right? A very basic understanding of self-love is it's a state of appreciation for oneself with a high regard for your own well-being, peace, and happiness. Right? So on the surface of it, it looks relatively simple. That it's me appreciating myself, and I have a high regard for my own well-being, peace, and happiness. That's how you would typically look at self-love, right? So what do we consciously understand about self-love? Again, nothing new to you necessarily, but start to look at these aspects in terms of how we understand self-love. So right now, it can mean when we look at self-love, it can mean talking to and about yourself with love, prioritizing yourself, giving yourself a break from self-judgment, trusting yourself, being true to yourself, being kind to yourself, setting healthy boundaries, and forgiving yourself whenever you aren't either true or nice or kind to yourself, right? Again, when we look at it consciously, this seems pretty simple. It seems like, these are things that I could do. It's simple as a concept, right? However, if it is so simple and all these things seem simple in theory, then why do we find it so hard to love us? And that's what we need to start to explore because there are various levels underneath that list of things that I gave you. Most individuals or most people will tell you, well, you need to set healthy boundaries. Right? And that's great. It's wonderful to set healthy boundaries. How do I do it? What is the reason I can't do it in the first place? All of that is something that we need to explore for ourselves. And each one of us has a different reason why our behavior the way it is. Behavior is the way it is. It's not necessarily the same reason. So we need to start to journey within, to start to understand what could it be. Really like to look at ourselves under the microscope in terms of what could it be that is causing the behavior that I have today. And that's when we are able to identify those barriers or those blocks or those things that are stopping me from being able to love myself, right? So if I go back to this list that I just said, which when I read it, probably most of you looked at it and said, well, yes, yeah, we know this. There's nothing special about this. We already know that we have to do this, right? When you look at it and you start to really break these aspects down, if you look at talking to and about yourself with love, first of all, ask yourself, do you do this? And if you have your notebook with you, do this with me. On a scale of 1 to 10, when you talk about yourself and when you talk to yourself, how many times, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most loving you can be, are you loving with yourself? Right? Just start to look at which aspect is an issue for you. So if you talk to yourself and when you say something about yourself, it is full of love, great, give yourself a 10. If not, where is it at? Is it at one where I'm mostly either making fun of myself or critical of myself, or I say these things that belittle me? Ask yourself what you say to yourself, what you say to others about you, what you allow others to say as well about you, right? Also look at that. In terms of whatever communication is about you is that from a space of love? So each one of you, I want you to take the time, just a moment, and you don't have to overthink it. Whatever comes to you. Maybe I'm somewhere in the middle right? Maybe 50% of the time I'm kind to myself, but maybe the rest of the times I'm not. I do say things that are not necessarily positive about me, or I do say things that allow me to beat myself up. Right? Great. Once you have that number, now look at point number two. Prioritizing yourself. Do you prioritize yourself? And look at the smallest thing in your life, right? Whatever it is that you're doing, whether it is taking free time for yourself. And a lot of times we make um, there's this misunderstanding that we have that I am prioritizing myself because I am taking out time to do work. That is not you prioritizing you. That is you prioritizing your work. Or I am taking out time for myself to do things for my kids. Yeah, while that's great, don't get me wrong. However, you are not prioritizing you necessarily. You are prioritizing them, right? So genuinely look at situations and ask yourself, do I do things because I enjoy them, I like them, I want to do that? Or do I do them because I believe I have to, because no one else will, or this is just my role. And I'm not saying you stop doing those things, but I want you to look at what percentage, what number of things, what quantum of things are you doing that you genuinely don't want to do, but believe you have to because you just have. Right? And we'll come to how we start to work on those things. But I want you to first look at it. Again, scale of 1 to 10. How much do you prioritize yourself? Let's say you wanted to take out time to go for a walk or exercise or just watch Netflix, whatever it is. Do you do that? Look back in the last 2 weeks, last 3 weeks, last 1 month. Really honestly look at it. Look, it doesn't matter to me whether you do or don't, but look at it for yourself. Do you prioritize it? If you do great, give yourself a 10. You don't genuinely look at where is the gap, where do you stand? 5, 4, 7. What is that number? And there's no metric around it, right? You decide for yourself. Right? Giving yourself a break from self judgment. How does self judgment look like? Look at every aspect of you, your body, your mind, your thinking, your life, everything that's you. Do you judge? Do you constantly tell yourself, oh, this is not good enough? Do you constantly say things to yourself which say, well, I'm stuck with this, right? While it can be about self talk, but mostly, is it a comparison or a judgment that you pass on yourself? Physically, maybe, or maybe I'm not tall enough, or I'm not good looking, or I'm not thin enough. I need to ensure that I'm thin, otherwise, what will people think? Whatever those things are, do you give yourself a break from self judgment? Now, let me be honest with you. Yes, there will be some aspects of self judgment. It's very difficult for us to get to unconditionality. But how much of it do you allow, and how much of it do you actually give yourself a break? Right? The next thing is trusting yourself. And all of these things are conscious, it's a list of conscious things that normally, if you ask anybody about self love, they will tell you these things. Right? However, it's easy to say, it's harder to do because we don't look at the subconscious aspects. So start to look at it now. Do you trust yourself? The belief system around self trust, is it there? That you don't know what is going to happen, there is ambiguity in the future. Do you trust yourself to deal with it? Or does it affect you in this moment because there is ambiguity? Do you trust yourself to handle the situations that life will give you? Or do you shy away from it? So again, for all of these things, look at it on a scale of 1 to 10. And we'll start to come to the elements of self-love. But let's start to look at this. Being true to yourself. The first thing you ask yourself is, do you know who you are? Are you aware of who you are? Are your thoughts genuinely your thoughts, or are they thoughts that you downloaded, which you think are your thoughts but aren't your thoughts? Look at your conditioning. What you believe, is it coming from you or is it coming from your family system? Is it coming from your societal system? Is it coming from your partner? Who is it coming from? Do you know that? And why this becomes so important is we don't know. And we haven't maybe even decided on it. We just have those belief systems because we believed them at some point and they became our reality. So, do you know who you are, what you want, and are you being true to it? Right? Are you kind? to yourself. Simple ways of evaluating whether you are kind to yourself. Do you take time for self care? Do you take care of your body? Do you take care of your experiences in it? You take care of your environment. Do you ensure you're not in a toxic environment? Have you done what you needed to do to not be in it? Right? Are you being kind and gentle with yourself on a daily basis? At this point, I want you to think about. Think about what are the things that if you were a third person looking at your life, would you say that, oh, well, these parts are not being kind to you? Which aspects are you not being kind to? Which aspects? Setting healthy boundaries. Are you in relationships, whether spousal relationships or romantic relationships or friendships or familiar relationships? Are you living from a space of enmeshment where everyone is involved or somebody else is involved and driving it and manipulating it? Or are you clear about what is okay for them to be involved in and what is not? Have you set those boundaries clearly? And not only with others. Have you set your boundaries with yourself? Have you looked at yourself and said, well, these are the things I'm not okay with doing. And I don't derive or define my state of being by these specific things that I'm doing. Right? Can you evaluate for yourself? Have you set the right boundaries for you in terms of discipline, in terms of following through on what your goals are, in terms of experiencing life the way you want? Have you set those boundaries? Right? And forgiving yourself. When you aren't able to do all of the things above, how long do you take? One, to realize that you need to forgive yourself, and two, to actually do all the things that you see as mistakes in your life. If you see any, that I should have done this, or I should have done it this way, or I should have taken this decision, I should have done it faster, I should have done it slower. All of those things are things that you possibly need to forgive yourself. Have you been able to do? Right? Right. So now we've taken this list of conscious things that most people will tell you this is self love. And we're starting to break it down to say, what is the reason I don't experience this or I cannot do this? If you're genuinely evaluating your own experiences, what are the things that you need to let go of, to change? What do you need to do to set the boundaries, to prioritize yourself, to be kind to yourself? You're already starting to think about the things that you need to do or implement to create self love for yourself. You're already identifying what is the limitation, what is the restriction around it, right? All right. Fantastic. So now we said, well, it's simple, but it's not necessarily easy. What is the reason? The reason is our subconscious condition, which very few of us know about or investigate to bring about change in our life. Right? Now, before we see how this really works, how the conditioning part works, I just want to let you all know that maybe some of you worked with therapists, maybe you've done sessions. However, what you realize is very rarely will you call me not being able to love myself an issue. You're never going to come for an issue like this. We don't call this an issue. Right? You're never going to come to therapy to resolve this. You're going to come to therapy to resolve specific things. Self-love is general. It is a way of being, right? And there are so many moving parts and elements to it. And when we talk about the aspects or the elements that make up self-love, you start to understand self-love is not just one thing. That I can't come and ask someone, well, teach me self-love and it happens. Like, it's not like that, right? And so what will happen is because there are so many moving parts, you're not going to be able to do therapy or go to someone to get help on building self-love. It's the reason we're doing this, which is an ongoing process of building that self-love. So you need to start to look at the various pieces that are building into your experience of self. Right? And that first starts with what is there at your subconscious level. What is your subconscious condition, right? And how do we do that? First, we have to understand where does this subconscious conditioning come from. Some of you may understand this to an extent, but let's really start to look at subconscious conditioning and where it comes from. And what I'd like to tell you, very happy to tell you, is that I've been able to set it up such that it almost feels like you're in the classroom with me. Just give me a moment. Let's see if we can make this. All right. So can you all see my whiteboard? Can you see me?
Yes. Could
All
you
right.
please spotlight your screen so that it can? Acha, no, I'll go to the speaker view.
Is it spotlighted now? Can everyone see it?
Yeah, it's clear.
Awesome. Right. So now what we're looking at is we're talking about conditioning. The reason I set this up is it's just easier when we create it, when we start to understand self-love through this process. Right now, how does it start? Now, the thing that you need to understand first is self-love is inherent. It's something that you already have within you. That that by default, that need to prioritize yourself, to take care of yourself, is there. Now, how can I prove that to you? Well, it's not about proving it to you, but I want you to observe. If any of you have seen or spent time with a baby, I want you to notice when a child is born, when a baby is born into the world, it is very clear about its own priorities, its own survival mechanisms, everything else. A baby doesn't care if it wakes you up at night. It doesn't care whether you feel upset that it's crying because it is very clear on its own self prioritization, right? So when we are all born, we already have this inherent understanding or this clear understanding of the fact that we need to prioritize ourselves. So when you're born, you're a baby, self love is inherent, it's built into you, right? It's a part of who we are. It's the reason, because over a period of time we tend to lose this. This is the reason why we find it difficult to be aligned with ourselves. Because when we were born, we had this, it was a part of us. We didn't care about what other people were thinking, what their opinions were. We were focused on what we needed, how we needed it, and however we needed to get it. Right? And it's very important for us to look at that and say, well, that's quite amazing that I already have it in me. So now all I have to do is find a way to awaken it by letting go of whatever caused this to change. Something somewhere from when you were a baby till today, something changed that this self-love got lost or got reduced or was affected in some way or the other. Right? So let's start to look at that. Let's say that there are two individuals. Let's say there's baby A and baby B. Now by default, like I said, self-love is inherent. And now, as the child grows up or the baby grows up, there is instant conditioning, right? So let's say they live in an environment where there is anger, or it is a toxic environment, right? Let's say this is what is happening. Is assumed. So what will happen? There will be two aspects to this download. Either the child will start to internalize this. If there is anger in and around them, they will start to internalize this and start to believe that I have to take in this emotion that is coming at me and I have to absorb it for some reason so that it doesn't exist on the outside, right? And their own emotions also they will start to internalize, which will create suppression. So you will notice that baby A may choose to look at the toxic environment, look at the environment that has anger in it, and internalize, right? Causing suppression. On the other side, there may be another baby in a similar environment where there is either toxicity or anger or anything else, any other negativity that may be there. And what will happen? They may externalize this. And what do I mean by externalizing it? Through conditioning of whatever is happening, the baby downloads now an understanding that to deal with life, this is the kind of environment I have to create. Whether it is creating drama, whether it is creating anger, whether it is blaming outwards, whatever that understanding is. So they start to externalize. So while there is externalization, there is a build up of emotion, right? Even though they are possibly expressing it, they're not genuinely releasing this emotion. So the conditioning becomes that I have to constantly experience this emotion. I have to get angry to get people to do what I want. I have to get upset to get people to give me what I want. As a child, these are the two things that would normally happen in terms of the condition, right? So there is either internalization or there is externalization, right? When in both scenarios, there is emotional buildup, but for one there is absorption or suppression. The other one, this emotional buildup can become explosive, right? So it will build up, and it will become explosive in terms of the behavior, right? So what is happening now? There's two forms of conditioning. As this continues, there are various other things that the baby will start to download, right? Here the baby understands that, okay, there is an environment where I have to keep others happy. So the focus is I have to keep others happy. That's how I will experience happiness. If others are happy, and a lot of us go through this, by the way, I want you to think about it. By default, our system is where parent will teach a child that as long as mommy and papa are happy with you, you're a good boy or you're a good girl. So in our minds, as children, what we download is this belief that as long as people around me are happy, I will be happy and I am good and I am worthy, or whatever it is that we download as children. And that's how majority of the parenting works. And there's I wouldn't say there's anything wrong or right with it, but that's what we download as children. As long as the people in and around me are happy, I will experience happiness. So what happens is, by default, my happiness or whatever positive emotion, my peace, whatever it is that I associate, gets gets linked to other people. It gets linked to other people, right? On the other side, for this setup where the child is building up emotion and there is an explosive or externalization of the emotion, the understanding starts to be that I have to keep creating whatever this environment is, keep creating the environment which is focused, which needs to be focused ideally on me. As long as I can do that, as long as people are focused on me, I will experience a sense of happiness. As long as I can create an environment where there is an emotional buildup and is explosive, I will experience happiness. Now, because of the toxicity and anger that is there and there's externalization, think of it this way. Now, a child growing up, let's say a boy growing up, sees that the father is getting angry in the household and he gets his way. And by constantly getting upset and angry, he's getting what he wants. That's what the child downloads. That in the environment, as long as I create upset or I create some form of the emotions that the child sees, I will be able to make me happy because I will get what I want. Right? Now, these are both extreme examples. The idea is to understand that each one of us may have oscillated between this conditioning, or we may have gone completely on either side, right? Depending on what your experiences were. And I'm no one to tell you which one your experience was. You have to look at it and identify. Depending on what your experience was, ultimately, this child may start to experience low self worth because they have externalized what they feel. Everything is dependent on whether other people see me as someone who's good or someone who's of value. So there starts to become low self worth, low self esteem, lesser self respect because the focus is on pleasing others. Right? Whereas on this side, what starts to develop is ego, a sense of focusing only on me rather than on irrespective of others, irrespective of others. So what's happening here now? Either there is a people pleasing tendency which is forming, which is low self esteem, or there's being built up. Again, two extremes. I want you to understand that. Ultimately, as this conditioning continues, right, you will get individuals on either side of the spectrum of self love. Now, what does that mean? Basically, self love is what we call as balance between these two. Right? What is that? This would be what you would have heard as terminology an empath who is not in charge. Right? There are empaths who are in charge, but an empath who is not in charge of themselves, who have low self-esteem, self-worth, because they have learned to absorb the energy of the environment, to internalize it, and not focus on their own needs and priorities. So what we end up getting on this spectrum is an empath, very low self-worth, self-esteem, tendency to please others, get affected a lot by the environment, and so internally experience a lot of conflict. On the other side would be a narcissist. Again, not going into specifics of what a narcissist is, but understanding that it's high ego. It's based on creating denial within yourself. It's based on making yourself feel good by making others feel bad. And so, narcissism with the base as selfishness, focus on self only. Self love, as you've gone through this, and if there is balanced conditioning, what you will experience is self love, which is essentially the most important aspect of it is that there are very clear boundaries for self, for others. And the most important thing is that when you experience self love, you are unaffected by the environment or others, yet you are connected to it. You are able to be sensitive to it without it affecting you. That is the key to self love. Every belief system you have needs to reflect these two aspects. Does it allow you to set a boundary and establish for yourself what you are okay with, and for others, what you are okay with and what you're not okay with? And two, does it allow you to be unaffected yet connected? And that's this. This is the most important thing that we don't understand. It's about balance. It's about bringing ourselves into this space, neither here nor here. This conditioning and all of these, the millions of experiences you had either on this side or on this side, is what you will start to change, what you need to change. And I don't know which one of you needs to change what. You have to look at it. But these are the aspects that you need to start to look at, to start to bring yourself back to balance. What stops you from being unaffected by your environment, by others, and remain connected? This aspect of conditioning is where you start your approach to self love. Knowing which way you've gone first, which one are you? Which parts of you are stronger? In which aspects? Maybe with your family, you're like this. Maybe on in the outside world, you're like this. Look at it. No one's 100% on either side. We've all experienced these conditionings in different ways. We have to bring ourselves to balance, which is self-love. So that's the first aspect of understanding self-love. The balance between your experiences which are externalized or experiences which you may have internalized, right? All right, great. So now when you look at this, and I want to give you a moment in case you want to write this down or create this structure, that's up to you. But I want you to Once you start to understand this, now let's start to look at the most common misconception with self-love. Now, the most common misconception with self-love, and I have this experience with so many of my clients. I ask them, do you want to love yourself? And they say, well, no, I don't. I ask them, what is the reason? I don't want to be selfish. Because what happens is a lot of individuals are here or somewhere here on this scale, not necessarily here, but here, getting affected by the environment or quite affected by their relationships. And so when they hear, they think self-love means going here. It doesn't. It doesn't mean going here. It means balance. And so understanding that, a lot of people say, well, I cannot prioritize myself. I'm not a selfish person. Self-love has nothing to do with selfishness. So let's start to look at what are the key differences between self-love and selfishness. So let's look at it. Where does self-love come from? What space does it come from? And what space does being selfish come from? So the first thing, the most important thing, self-love comes from a space of awareness, both internal and external. Becoming aware at a much broader level of what you are feeling, what the consequences are of your actions, and what others are feeling without letting it affect you. That's what is awareness. Selfishness comes from a space of denial, from a space that, well, I don't care, I don't know, others have to deal with their own stuff, I only focus on me, I feel better based on the fact that others feel worse about themselves, right? It comes from a space of denial, of not willing to look at yourself and really start to look at, are you coming from a space of being affected and projecting, right? Or are you coming from a space of actually being aware, right? So the first key difference in being selfish and having self-love for yourself is awareness versus denial. The next thing is someone who has self-love will always be true to their own self. You are true to you, your own being. Whatever it is, I have decided that I'm good or I'm good enough for this specific thing. And so I will be true to me. It doesn't matter what the outside world is experiencing, is telling me, is thinking. However, selfishness will always be true to the outside, or you can call it fake for the outside. I want to look good, right? The space of ego. I want to be able to look good. And so I will project. And that's what selfishness is. Now, the reason I'm telling you this, and maybe some of you know this, that we have to be able to understand what self-love is, so that when you actually take those decisions in your life, and there are, believe me, even if you know self-love, there will be lots of you, I have experienced it myself, who are unable to, let's say, in a close relationship, say no without justifying yourself. Say, no, I don't want you to do that. It's very hard for us. We're never taught that. And so when you start to tell yourself and explain to yourself that I'm coming from a space of awareness, I'm saying no, because if I say yes, I may do it, but I will resent it later. If I say yes, I may do it, but I would do it maybe 50%, and the other person will resent me for it. So what am I doing? I'm coming from a space of awareness and being true to me. I don't want to do it. I'm not okay with it. And I need to be comfortable to communicate, right? And that's why it's important to know that when you are in a state of awareness, that you are true to yourself, you are experiencing self. The next aspect is, and I cannot reiterate this even more, I've said it multiple times, but healthy boundaries. And I want you to realize there are various kinds of boundaries, and we're going to do another. There will be a few other classes on boundaries specifically, but I want you to just understand what are boundaries, right? Start to look at boundaries in terms of what you are okay with and what you are not okay. and express them. Let people know. How many of us have a conversation with our partners, with our either romantic partners or husbands or wives or spouses, whatever it is, about what we are okay with and what we aren't okay with? Are you absolutely crystal clear that this part is not okay with me? Or do we just go with the flow, assume that they would know what we are and aren't okay? Right? Until you know for yourself, what are you okay with? What level of acceptance do you have for emotional abuse? Start to think about it. What, according to you, is emotional abuse? Is someone constantly criticizing you emotional abuse for you? Are you willing to accept it? Are you not willing to accept it? And again, each one of us will have different degrees to it. You have to ask yourself, what is your boundary? What is acceptable and what is not acceptable? And does the other person know that? And if it is not acceptable, what are the consequences for you, for them, whichever way? Don't wait till something happens before you start to understand, oh, this is a boundary that was breached. And that's true for all relationships, not only romantic relationships or relationships based on marriage, but all relationships with your parents, with your siblings, with professionals. What are your boundaries? Start to really, really look at that. So, having healthy boundaries, which are permeable, it's not like you're hard and fast that it has to be, which are based on logic, which are based on situation, is very important, right? For someone who's selfish, they are okay to invade the boundary. They may have the boundary for themselves. We don't, that's that's something that doesn't necessarily define whether they are selfish or not. But they are okay invading the boundary. They are okay with someone else being uncomfortable for their own comfort, right? That's what selfish is. And so differentiate that and know that if you are moving towards self-love, you're not moving towards this, you're moving towards, right? The other aspect of the difference between self-love and being selfish is someone who has self-love has inherent value for themselves. Whatever you do, you may not be the best at what you do, right? Based on 100 different metrics. But I still value what I do. I still believe that even what I do and what I bring to the table is of value. Being able to do that shows that you have a sense of self love, a sense of value for yourself. Whereas if you come from a space of being selfish, it comes from a space of actually creating devalue or devaluing others. I get ahead by making others look bad. It's not about whether I'm good or not. I get ahead by making others look bad. Again, you're not moving towards this when you're moving towards self love. You're moving towards this. You're valuing yourself irrespective of others. You're not focusing on devaluing others. But that's what selfishness looks like. That's maybe what a narcissist may do, right? Look at these aspects, these different things, these 4 points to really evaluate for yourself when you have to take a decision which prioritizes you. Is it coming from here or is it coming from here? And the most important, self love, it comes from a space of being secure. And selfishness comes from a space being insecure, right? Which is the ego space. This comes from a space of acceptance. Are you secure with who you are? When you are secure with the fact that I'm okay doing something, I'm okay doing this, I'm okay working with someone, I'm okay doing this because I am not concerned how I will look. I may look good, I may look bad. That's okay. I'm accepting of myself and of others and of the situation because I come from the space or the belief system that I will figure it out. Whereas selfishness, where you will try and get your way without actually having to put in the effort, comes from a space of insecurity or ego because a lot of us don't want to be found out. I was recently working with a client and they were talking about being very concerned about their own confidence and overthinking, yet they were functioning from a space of ego because they say, I cannot let the people at work know that I don't know these things. So what I do, I will say that I know it and then I try and figure it out, and it drives me absolutely insane because it takes so long and they wonder why I'm taking so long and it really upsets me. Right? But I will never let them know that I don't know it. And so that's functioning from a space of insecurity. And I kid you not, this is something recently that has happened. And I told him, try this. Tell them, I don't know. Come from that space of being secure that what you do know is fine. Tell them you don't know. He did that, and instantly, someone else in the team said, I will teach you. And in 10 minutes, something that he would have taken 2 days to figure out was done. And he learned how to do it. And so, most of us worry and we come from that space of insecurity. Oh my God, people will find out that I don't know this. I don't know how to answer this. They will think badly of me. And so we function from a space of ego rather than from a space of acceptance. Knowing these two things, the difference, whether you work with people, whether you are looking at it for yourself, is key. Because you will always come across this where people will say, well, you're being selfish because you're prioritizing yourself. And you need to be able to explain it that no, this is a boundary. I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm merely deciding for me. And that's why it's self love. It comes from a space of being secure and self acceptance, right? So look at these two things. These are critical in terms of moving yourself towards self love. This will be the metric. Am I being true to myself? Am I being aware of what are the consequences? And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Am I setting the healthy boundaries? Am I valuing myself in every moment? And am I experiencing being secure? Right? And now let's start to look at how we can be this. What are the elements that build up self love? So we can look at self love in terms of an umbrella term. There are various aspects to self love. It sort of breaks out like an umbrella into various aspects. Forgive me, my umbrella may not look great, but I'm trying. Right. So the first aspect is self care, right? Self care is something that a lot of us already do. We eat right, we exercise, we look after our body more at the physical level, more at a level where we are taking care of ourselves. We have a bath, hygiene, blah, 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 all of those basic things, right? Which is great. Don't get me wrong. It's very important in terms of being able to take care of yourself. A lot of us also have challenges with that in terms of eating right, exercising. But self care is the first thing, the physical body that we need to take care of. However, in terms of self love, we stop here. We stop here and say, well, I love myself because I'm taking care of my body and I'm going out, I'm doing all the work, so I love myself. We don't start to look at all the other aspects. And what are the other aspects? The second is building up self esteem or self worth. Starting to look at how you view yourself. What is your story for your life? How do you see yourself? Are you able to see yourself and look at yourself and say, well, anything that happens to me tomorrow, because I don't know what's going to come tomorrow, but whatever happens to me, I will figure it out. I know that I will be able to do that. I see me bringing a lot of value to everything that I do. Can you genuinely say that to yourself? To everything. Do you set that understanding for yourself, or do you constantly create a feeling of that I'm not good enough, I won't be able to do? What is it that you do? When we talk more about this, and we are going to in some of the other ones, but when we start to look at self-worth, you have to look at what is the narrative of your life and who set it. Was there a mother or a father who defined and told you, well, you aren't good enough, or you'll never be good enough because you're not smart, or you're not tall, or you're not this, or you're not that? Because in the beginning, I asked you, do you know whether who you are, what your thoughts are, right? Because a lot of those thoughts may not be yours, but it's a story that was told to you, and it becomes so repetitive that you believe that it is your story. If somebody tells you you're not intelligent enough, or you don't have the aptitude for doing something, I can tell you that that's bullshit. Forgive my language, but it is. The question is, do you believe them when they tell you? Because if you do, then this is something that is being affected and will bring your self love. Let's look at the third thing: trusting yourself. There are no rights or wrongs. Any decision that you take will be right as long as you are willing to put in the effort to make it work. There are no rights or wrongs. But we are fixated on this belief that there is a right decision and a wrong decision. There isn't. Believe me, most of the right decisions, any success stories that you see, are people who have taken decisions which at that point everyone thought were wrong and made them right. And that is true for all of us. Any decision we take, are we willing to put committed, concerted effort behind it to make it right? And so what happens is when we come to a decision point, should I change my job? Should I become a therapist? Should I move out of this relationship? Should I move in with this person? All of that comes from a space of, is it there's a right or a wrong? There isn't. And so if you fixate on that and spend most of your time thinking about that in terms of what is right or wrong, rather than going back to your own sense of awareness, you will constantly not be in a space of not being able to trust yourself. And a lot of the things in terms of trusting yourself comes from how honest you are with you. When someone asks you, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Genuinely asks you, not just by the by, are you able to be honest with yourself? Because if you're telling yourself that no, there's nothing wrong with me or I'm absolutely fine, that's great. But if there is something wrong with you, your body, your subconscious stops trusting you because you're saying something opposite to what is actually happening within you. And so there is conflict. And that's why doubt gets created. This is the major reason for doubt, because I say something else, but I'm experiencing something else. When you build that honesty, that connect back with yourself, the trust starts to come back because your body now trusts you, your mind trusts you because it understands that you understand, right? And that becomes key in terms of building self trust. The fourth element is acceptance. Are you in acceptance of yourself, or are you focused on blame? Now, what does that mean? When you look back again at your life, the story of your life, how does the story read? How does it come off to you? Is it that, well, I was born in this family that didn't give me this or didn't give me that, or I went to the wrong school, or I just didn't get the right opportunities? Or are you in 100% acceptance of the fact that I made some mistakes, but all of them led to who I am today, and I love that. I love that about me. I accept who I am. That's one thing that you need to look at in terms of self acceptance. The second is your physicality, your nose, your eyes, your face, your height, your weight. How much in acceptance of it are you? You constantly say, well, I wish I had a thinner nose, or I wish my ears were smaller, whatever it is. How much in acceptance are you of yourself? The most important myth of acceptance, people tell me that, Rachit, well, if I accept myself, then I won't improve. That's not true. You need to accept yourself to improve. Whatever it is, whatever you have within you is good enough. But that doesn't mean you cannot improve. That's not linked to one to the other, but we tend to link it. If I accept myself, that means that I'm accepting everything about me and I love it, and so then I'm not going to improve. That's not true. In fact, it's the opposite. When you accept where you are rather than being in denial, accept who you are and you're comfortable with it. You will do what you need to bring about a change that will improve your life, right? And so building acceptance, look at it for yourself. What are those little parts in your life, those little moments in your life that you've not accepted, that you've not accepted your little inner child from different experiences? Number 5 is forgiveness. When you start to find these parts of you that you haven't accepted, and just going back to self acceptance, that's what shadow work is, which we'll talk about. However, acceptance, the opposite is rejection. How many times have you rejected yourself? And when we start to look at the shadows within us, those parts of us which are deeply rejected, and start to work with them, that's what we call shadow work. And that's when we start to come with acceptance. So look through your life. What are the parts of you that you have totally rejected? That you have felt that, well, that part of my life, I don't even want to look at. That part is sitting there causing some behavior in your life today, which is detrimental to your self love. Right? Forgiveness. In every moment, if you feel that you've made a mistake, the choice you have to make is to forgive yourself. Not because it's right to do it or not because I'm saying so, but because forgiveness essentially means that I'm not going to let something in my past affect me. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that I will still make the same mistake because I have forgiven myself, I will still make the same mistake. No, that's not what it means. It means that you are now choosing, making a conscious choice of letting go of the past from affecting you, right? And so choosing forgiveness for even the smallest of things is so important. It's not that important to forgive others as it is to forgive yourself for allowing something to happen to you, for doing something that you didn't want to do. Forgiving your little parts allows you to love yourself. Otherwise, those parts sit there at the subconscious level, little inner children, sitting there, upset with you, and don't allow you to love yourself. They are the ones who drive our self esteem as well. So, choosing to forgive yourself on a constant, ongoing basis. And number six, respecting and valuing yourself. So, we talked about this prioritization. How do we do this? By setting the right boundaries, prioritizing yourself, by setting the right boundaries, respecting what you bring to the table, valuing what you bring to the table. This is what rolls up into you being able to love yourself, irrespective of what other people's opinions is. I respect the fact that I bring this to a relationship. I respect the fact that I bring this to a job or to a business. This is my skill set. Rather than looking at that skill set and saying, well, I don't know enough, I say, no, I respect the fact that I bring this to the table. And you have to find that. I'm telling you, it is there. You have to find it. In every situation, you have to say, well, this is what I bring to the table. Rather than looking and go, oh my God, I don't know what I bring to the table. No one else will know. You have to find what that is and say, well, this is what I bring to the table. Always. At every moment, in every opportunity, that's how you learn to respect yourself. And when you bring that to the table, you demand or command a certain level of value for it. And when you demand or command a certain level of value for it, what happens is, even in relationships, you only then function in a relationship where you do have your self respect intact. You're not compromising on it. At work, where your self respect is given to you, if it's not changed the environment, you can either choose to devalue yourself or choose to value yourself and say, well, there is another opportunity where I will be valued. Right? So being able to prioritize yourself, however hard it may be, is definitely a choice which you make to show yourself that you love yourself. And number seven, all of these will definitely feed into my compassion and kindness for myself. Your self talk is driven by this. So, for example, now let's resolve one basic thing. If your self talk isn't in place, that means that there are little parts of you somewhere sitting, either feeling disrespected, either feeling rejected, either feeling not worthy, or feeling doubt. There's these little parts of you sitting there, or feeling that they haven't been forgiven and upset. They're the ones feeding in to your self-talk. It's not you. The current you knows. The current you knows that I want to be able to positively say things to myself. But their belief systems, their unexpressed emotions, all of it are feeding into your inability to be compassionate and kind and have the right self. All right. Okay. Right. So I'm going to move you back now to me on my laptop. So what we covered were the elements of self-love, right? The most important aspect of this is to look at it on a day-to-day basis. Are you genuinely breaking down self-love into this? Otherwise, it's easy to say, well, I don't know how to love myself. I had a client say that to me yesterday. I don't know how to love myself, and was in a toxic environment which she wanted to change but was not changing because her parents were not necessarily approving of it or being nice about it, right? the action that needs to be taken. She knows it's a toxic environment. She knows she wants more. She knows it's a toxic environment for her children as well. The action around trusting herself, right, around being able to accept the situation was missing. And so, how would it be possible to be able to love yourself? Because your mind is by default downloading the fact that you're not willing to do what you want to love yourself, right? Okay, so I think we're already at the top of the hour. There are a couple of things that I will be covering in next month's workshop, but I'm just going to share the screen and show that to you so that we can talk about it. Yeah, I was going to talk about additionally in the next one, which is part 2, is the barriers to self-love, right? Abuse. I want each one of you to write this down. If you've experienced this, mental, emotional, physical abuse in any form, in any way, right? So think of the past relationship or a current one, whether romantic or otherwise, which was controlling and abusive emotionally or physically. How does it make you feel now? Write down the emotions. That's important. If you work on it, great. If you haven't, look at it. Trauma. Again, trauma is not about the magnitude of what the issue is. Trauma is about what you downloaded, right? So it's not about, oh, it has to be either some abuse or sexual or accidental. It doesn't have to. Trauma is just a moment of shock that I experienced, a moment of a deep rooted emotion that I experienced. Look at it. What is the trauma that you haven't worked with? Have you really let it go? And if not, how does that make you feel right now? You will start to look at based on these barriers to self love, you will start to see what are the emotions that are holding you. Parental relationships is a core issue. Hopefully, each one of you knows to look at that and say, are you complete with your parents? Have you let go of what you really do? Are you able to be comfortable in their space, in your space with them, both ways? Are you? If not, there are belief systems that are sitting there which are affecting your behavior, which you need to resolve. So when you think about your parents, how do you feel? Again, look at the emotions. And of course, we talked about conditioning based on what I just told you. Where do you stand on that? Are you an empath? Are you a narcissist? Are you parts of both in different aspects of your life? If so, bring them to balance. Look at what was that conditioning? What was the belief system that stops you from being in balance, being able to say no when you need to, being able to prioritize yourself. And it will come from those early formative years, 4, 5, 6, 10, maybe up to 13, 14, 15 years of age. Look at those aspects so that you can work on it because we are going to do the deep work in the upcoming aspects or the elements. That being said, if there are any questions, I would you can either unmute yourself and ask, or you can type them out if you would like. Otherwise, we've covered what we had to for today. Are there any questions? All right, so fantastic. I'm assuming that I was very clear about all of those, or you guys understood it very well. Either ways, I'm very happy. Thank you so much. Oh, yes, Ganesh. Yes, the recording is available later. All EHC work that we do, the recordings will be available to each one of you on the platform. Right. So, thank you very much for your time this evening, each one of you. It's great to see all of you here being part of this platform. I promise you, each of these elements that I talked about, acceptance, self-esteem, self-care, trust, we're going to work on them one by one. You're not going to be able to do this necessarily in an extended form of therapy. The reason is we don't even know where those issues lie right now. We're opening it up for ourselves because we want to improve those aspects of ourselves, right? So if you have specific issues, please go to therapy. But this is an ongoing process of resolving and transforming those inner parts of us as we go through life so that we experience life at a much higher, better, deeper level. Right, fantastic. Thank you very much. It was absolutely wonderful. I love this. I love the fact that each one of you are here. I look forward to seeing all of you on Wednesday as well. We're doing a navigation for energetic balancing on Wednesday. So each one of you can join in. It'll again be the same format and the recording will be available. So before we close, Blossom, if you would like to just...
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you the next time. Thank you so much. And thank you, Rajat.
do leave your comments on our forum. Say hi. Stay connected. The idea is to create the community where each one of us is supporting each other. So do that, and I will see you hopefully next week. Take care. Have a great weekend. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was just amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachit. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachit.